Hello YouTube, and welcome to part 2 of A History of Musical Theater. So to continue off where I left in the last part, and if you haven't caught that, you can click right up here. World War I brought a need to escape some of the harsh realities of life. Musical theater was fortunately the perfect place to seek that respite. In fact, musicals were one of the only businesses at the time to blow up in England and America. The addition of jazz and ragtime to musical theater brought American musical theater to prominence over English. So we get composers like the Gershwin brothers, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, and even Rodgers and Hart. Through the 20s and into the Great Depression, musicals began to use elements from vaudeville and big music hall type entertainment. This led actors to become huge stars as they led intricate dance routines. Some of the biggest names to come out of this period were Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, and even the Barrymore family. Now, because of this First World War and the Depression, the public really didn't want to seek out complicated plots. They were more interested in the light, happy vaudeville type plots. But one musical changed that tradition: Showboat. This musical was written by Curran and Hammerstein, and it tackled such intense issues as racism, marital infidelity, poverty, and social injustice. It ran for 572 performances. Pretty crazy at the time. The influence of Showboat began to take hold in the 30s, and soon the industry was filled with complex plots. One of the most famous musicals to come out of this time was Porgy and Bess by the Gershwin brothers. Interestingly, it was performed by an entirely African-American cast, which was rare to say the least at this time. Then came what is known as the Golden Age of Broadway. The Golden Age encompassed the 40s through the 60s, typically associated with beginning with Oklahoma and ending with Hair. In fact, the collaboration of Rodgers and Hammerstein, who wrote Oklahoma, was a defining characteristic of the early part of the Golden Age. In addition to Oklahoma, they wrote such blockbusters as Carousel, South Pacific, The King and I, and The Sound of Music, just to name a few. And by the way, all of those became major motion pictures. Another characteristic of the Golden Age of Broadway was Americana, particularly during World War II. Prominent Americana musicals include On the Town by Bernstein, Annie Get Your Gun by Berlin, Kiss Me Kate by Porter, and of course Guys and Dolls by Lesser and Burroughs. Again, all of these musicals were made into huge Hollywood flicks. Personally, Annie Get Your Gun is one of my favorite musicals of all time. Back when I used to sing musical theater, all I wanted to do was be Ethel Merman. One of the biggest things to happen to Broadway was West Side Story. Music was written by Leonard Bernstein, a prominent composer and conductor at the time, and lyrics were written by Stephen Sondheim. While it was beaten out for popularity by The Music Man by Meredith Willson, it was still revolutionary. It set Romeo and Juliet in 50s New York City. Instead of the Montagues and the Capulettis, you get the Sharks and the Jets opposing ethnic gangs. Bernstein also took elements of his operatic compositional style and used them in this musical. He used such things as extended harmonies, leitmotifs, and even some more complicated vocal lines. While it only won 1 Tony because it was competing with The Music Man, it won 10 Oscars when it was later turned into a movie. And this was also Stephen Sondheim's debut on Broadway. From the 1960s through till today, Sondheim is still one of the most prominent and important composer-lyricists of all time. He wrote such musicals as Gypsy, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Follies, Company, Sweeney Todd, which also made a great movie, Assassins, which is about some of the greatest attempts of assassination and successful assassinations over history, and Into the Woods. Into the Woods, by the way, is currently being turned into a major motion picture with such actors as Meryl Streep, Johnny Depp, Chris Pine, Anna Kendrick, and Emily Blunt. Should be exciting! As I mentioned, most people consider the end of the Golden Age to align with the production of Hair. Hair was composed by McDermott, and the lyrics were written by Ragney and Rado. It was also one of the first rock musicals. Yeah, the music was definitely rock style, and it also included nudity and extreme political commentary on the Vietnam War. It started a trend with other rock musicals such as Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, and Tommy, which I love. Another influence in musical theater at the time was an African-American influence. This showed up in shows like Raisin, Dreamgirls, and The Wiz. Funny story, my middle school decided to put on The Wiz, ignoring the fact that the majority of our students were either white or Asian. I made a very, very weird Dorothy in that production. In the 1970s, we get some more classics like A Chorus Line, which is based on true stories of chorus singers and dancers on Broadway, Pippin by Stephen Schwartz, in which I got to play Catherine, and literally one time forgot to put pants on when I went on stage. Everyone's worst nightmare happened to this girl. And Cabaret in Chicago by Kander and Ebb. In the 1980s and 1990s, we get the mega musicals such as Les Miserables and Miss Saigon by the French duo Schoenberg and Bouville, Evita, Cats, Phantom of the Opera by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and even Disney musical adaptations of their cartoon films like Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. Elton John even created his own musical version of Aida. And of course, we can't forget the absurd plots used to create the jukebox musicals, such as Mamma Mia with music by ABBA, Movin' Out with music by Billy Joel, Good Vibrations with hits from the Beach Boys, and Jersey Boys with tunes from the Four Seasons. Musicals began to use huge budgets and production teams, so now pretty much only corporate sponsors can sponsor a Broadway production. The spectacle is now expected in these mainstream Broadway productions. A side effect of a huge investment necessity means that there also has to be a huge return profit. This means that lyricists and composers more often than not turn to already pre-established successful stories from either movies or books. The Producers, Spamalot, Hairspray, and Legally Blonde were all successful movies before they were turned into musicals. And Lord of the Rings, Wicked, Little Women, and Dracula were all very popular books. Sometimes we get some fantastic new and innovative works like the Book of Mormon that just came out recently, which was written and created by the same people that make South Park. I haven't been able to see it yet, but I've listened to the soundtrack and I love it. I have some serious hope for the future of musical theater though, and most of it comes from the underground scene. Some of my favorite musicals are more cult than popular, and they include Urinetown, which takes place in a future society where water's scarce and you have to pay to pee, and it's pretty genius. And also Bat Boy, which is of course, about a half-boy, half-bat who struggles against discrimination in a small town. But what are some of your favorite musicals? Let me know down below in the comments, or on the Facebook page, or via Twitter. Until next week, stay younger than springtime. Musicology.